Hello, Living as a Disciple students. We're about to start our last ed puzzle for spring break, last ed puzzle for lab 2. And Mr. Schonhoff's in a good mood this morning as I share my screen with you, because as he drives to school now in the morning, it is no longer dark and he gets to watch the sunset every day as he comes in, which is awesome. It's easy to find God sometimes. It's hard to look. Anyways, lab 2, day 7. Immigration. So to start, just a couple vocabulary terms related to immigration. An immigrant is a person who moved to take residence in another country. Pretty simple. A refugee is a person who seeks protection in another country because of war, disaster, persecution, etc. So somebody who was fleeing maybe the carnage by an earthquake or was fleeing because of some war going on, that is a refugee. And a diaspora is a movement, migration, or scattering of a people away from their homeland. So anytime there's a mass movement of people away because of probably war or disaster, persecution. A few years back, there was the refugee crisis in Syria, is where we heard about it. That would be considered a diaspora. All right, immigration in the Bible. So there's a lot of discussion of immigration to some extent in the Bible, especially the Old Testament. In the Old Testament, Abraham is called to immigrate to a new land. He's called to move to a new land. So the father of faith was himself an immigrant. All throughout the Jewish scriptures in the Old Testament, the Jews are commanded to take care of 3 types of people. It was widows, orphans, and foreigners. Some of the most vulnerable populations. Widows, because they were women were considered property. So once a husband died, the woman literally had nothing. So widows, orphans, again, if you don't have a family or a tribe to take care of you, you're very vulnerable. And foreigners, if you don't have family, those connections in a new land, it's easy to be taken advantage of. And then the Israelites themselves became refugees after they were invaded multiple times. This is known as the Jewish diaspora. They were invaded, they were kicked out of their homeland, and they became refugees in a new land. And in the New Testament, Jesus and his families were refugees in Egypt, right? They were escaping persecution when they fled to Egypt. And in Matthew 25, Jesus says, he says, when you have welcomed the stranger, you have welcomed me. He says, whatever you did to the least of these, you did to me. And he included the idea of welcoming the stranger, welcoming the foreigner, welcoming the immigrant. So in 2003, the United States bishops wrote a pastoral letter in collaboration with the bishops in Mexico. And what they did, because of the many different immigration issues between the U.S. and Mexico, is they developed a set of guidelines that they think should guide lawmakers on immigration issues. And one, they said people have the right to immigrate. This has been a right of people for years, for centuries, to move to a new place, especially if there are no opportunities or there aren't basic necessities in their homeland. That is what, in the end, causes a lot of people to immigrate from Mexico to the United States, is a lack of opportunity or basic necessities. They also say nations have the right to control their borders. So they say you shouldn't just open up your borders and say, everybody come in. That is a right to promote the common good. Nations have a right to control their borders, but it must be done with justice, mercy, and respect. So how can you control the borders without while ensuring that people are still treated fairly, and that refugees should always be given protection. So if somebody is fleeing persecution, we need to do our best as a country to provide asylum or refuge to them. So basically, in summary, to balance welcoming the stranger with protecting borders to ensure the common good. And that's the key point here, is what's the common good? How can we ensure that the common good happens? All right, this is the last slide, and this is the U.S. bishops actually have a few teachings on illegal immigration. So There are numerous undocumented workers in the United States, and the U.S. bishops provided a set of principles in order for Catholics to try to figure out, how do you deal with this? What do you think about this? And they said, first, we need to work to eliminate the root causes of immigration: war, violence, poverty. Right? If there wasn't war and violence in nations where there weren't opportunities, people wouldn't want to immigrate as much. And that sounds really simple. And obviously, this is hard to do, to eliminate these things, but to continue to try to have conversion ourselves and see that the world has conversion too. Their big thing, again, protect families. We've talked about that. That's a Catholic social teaching, that laws should protect families. So they say immigration laws should protect families. So in the last year or so, there was many cases of families being separated once they're caught trying to enter the country illegally. The bishops would say that's not okay. Right? The trauma that you're affecting on those children is not okay. Our laws must protect families. The U.S. government should provide path to citizenship for undocumented workers who have been here for many years. So if someone is undocumented and they have been working here for 10 years, that the right thing to do is probably not to deport them away from their family and away from their community, especially if they're a contributing member of society. There should be some sort of path for citizenship. They also mentioned greater opportunities for legal immigration. So there's a U.S. runs on a quota system, which there's a certain number of people allowed from different countries each year. And the bishops say we need to have higher quotas. And finally, they say that the dignity and rights of immigrants caught entering the country illegally must be respected. And so we must try to ensure good conditions, try to ensure that we're treating people like people, even if they are breaking a law. All right, so look forward to discussing this in class. We'll start looking at some current immigration issues. And as always, like, comment, and subscribe.